Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm recapping my second year attending LA Comic-Con. This convention is so much fun. There's so much to explore, so many great panels, and I overheard a few people saying that this was their first fan convention. I was thinking to myself, that was me last year. My first fan convention last year was going to LA Comic-Con, so now here I was a year later. And when I went, I knew there were a couple of panels I wanted to go to, like when I looked beforehand at the programming schedule. But for the most part, the joy of this is just like the discovery of who am I going to see here and the things I'm going to want to purchase. And it really is kind of like a playground of like merriment and joy, and so much. The artists are so talented. I'm always blown away by people's talent, and I make sure to let them know it. Like I always say to them, like, especially when I buy something, I say, "Oh, you're so talented. I love your stuff," and they're always very appreciative because you can never give too many compliments, especially just for artists who work so hard and they have such awesome stuff that they create. And so the main thing I knew I wanted to go to was a few panels, one of which was a little office reunion panel with Rainn Wilson and Paul Lieberstein, aka Dwight Schrute, and Toby Flenderson. And that was at the main stage of the convention. So like I said, I had been there last year, so I pretty much remembered vaguely where things were. So it was like when you walk in, like thankfully there's huge signs, so it's like badge pickup, you pick up your badge, then like I went over to like basically crossed through the building because it is a large convention hall, and then there's all the panel rooms and stuff, but I went over to like the main stage, and that's where Artist Alley is, so all the vendors and things like that. And so that was a lot of fun, that panel. Well, the moderator did a great job. What was funny was that the first question she asked, she said was, "So I think all of us want to know who made the mess in the microwave." You know, that episode when Pam opens the microwave and it's all disgusting, and then she writes the note, and then we never find out who did it. And what was funny was that both of them said, both Paul and Rainn said, "I don't remember the episode." Like they both were just like, "We don't remember that, sorry." And it's so funny because Rainn, he has such like an interesting sense of humor. I don't know, but the first thing he said was, "Wow, they don't spring for chairs here, huh?" Because like most of us were standing. And then he's like, "Bunch of cheap bastards at this convention." And then what he was saying was like, "You fans must probably know better than us with the episodes." And then he was asking how many people have seen it over 20 times. And then a few people raised their hands. And then he said, "Okay, how many over 30? And then someone raised their hand. They're like, and he was like, "Really? Over 30? Seriously?" And then he's like, "Wow, get a life." I'm like, damn, Rainn, roasting your fans, but so funny. But then what was hilarious, the last question someone asked was that they asked basically, "Did you get to try Kevin's chili?" And then Rainn just said, "We sucked it out of the carpet." And then 2 seconds later, that's what she said. I was like, hell yeah, Rainn, you're just like on point with the, that was so funny. So that was really a fun panel. Just seeing them in person is such a joy too, because again, these actors that see them on TV all these years and rewatching the show over and over, then seeing them in person, it's like, it's got me a teeny bit emotional. I wasn't expecting that. Similarly, like when I saw Steve Burns in person last year, that was different though, because that's like connected to Blue's Clues, my childhood. All of us who grew up with that show. So I immediately teared up when I saw Steve Burns in person too. So similarly this year, I was like, oh my goodness, it's Paul Lieberstein. He's a fantastic writer, Paul, because obviously, and then also he was a showrunner for The Office at one point as well. And he wrote that backdoor pilot episode that did not go to series, The Farm, so it's just an episode of The Office, but it would have been its own spin-off series with Dwight managing the farm with his brother and sister, but that wasn't picked up. And so, it just was a lot of fun. They were talking about, like, reminiscing about their favorite bloopers and, like, fun moments to film, and they always go back to, they mentioned it, like, the hardest they all laughed was the scene where Kevin sits on Michael's lap and just like the noises coming out of Steve Carell and how they were breaking, like they all were laughing. They couldn't have like a solid reaction from anyone because everyone was like ducking out of the scene, laughing, like trying to keep it together. So that's so funny. And just like, "Oh, what would you like for Christmas, little boy?" That whole scene. So that's so funny. Rainn also was talking about like the progression of Dwight, and he more or less said that Dwight didn't really evolve as a character. He was saying that Dwight from the episodes like The Alliance from season 1 is the same as Dwight in the finale. And he said, like, yes, Dwight becomes a husband and father, but for the most part, he's still just like this, this glorious nerd. So it is fantastic, So it's so funny. So that was a lot of fun with that panel. There was a booth, well, not little, it was a big booth for Neopets for its 25th anniversary. And I actually, if you followed them, you got a free calendar. So I got a free calendar and a sticker. I was like, this is so cool. Like, the artwork is so, fun and colorful. But I was telling them, I was like, oh man, 12-year-old me absolutely adored Neopets. That was my favorite thing. I'd play it for hours and hours and hours. The main thing I remember was I had, all the Neopets. If you play Neopets, so basically what it is, it's a website where you can, quote unquote, adopt pets. Like, you make the pets, you could choose the color. There's all these different creatures, basically, that are like animals, so to speak, but they're Neopets. And then you have to feed them, you take care of them, you can give them accessories. There's a bunch of mini games. There's a thing called, I think it's called Neopia, but I always said Neopia, but it's Neopia, and it's basically where you can virtually shop for stuff. That's what's so funny. The internet back in the early 2000s is obviously so much different compared to what it is now, but so early 2000s internet was an event. That was a thing. I don't know, also going on AOL, and again, pouring out for AIM, chatting endlessly with my friends, with my family on, instant messaging. Oh my goodness, on AOL. But what I do remember from that is I had two, I think it's pronounced Kacheeks. It's Kacheek, Kacheeks. I think that's how you pronounce it. I remember there was a thing where I learned how to draw them. They're kind of like foxes. They're very cute. So I had a couple of those, and I don't remember my other pets that I had, but I distinctly remember I had a blue Kacheek named Squiggles49, an amazing name, I know. And then I had a green Kacheek. It was Treasure Hunter, I want to say 94. These are amazing pet names, I know. 12-year-old me was, oh my goodness. And I had two other ones, because I think you could have up to 4 Neopets. I don't remember offhand, but anyway, so that's fun reminiscing about all that. So that just brought me back. I was like, oh man, 12-year-old me was obsessed with Neopets. They had also hats and stuff. They had other merch too. But yeah, that was really fun. So 25th anniversary of Neopets. Amazing that website is still around. I love that. But so afterward, there were a couple of panels I knew I wanted to go to. One of them was something I just not stumbled on, but when I was looking at the programming, I was like, oh, I want to go to this. It was a panel with Ego Plum, who does music for a bunch of cartoons. So he was just sharing about basically working on different projects. And he said, what I found interesting was that the worst project he had to work on, he didn't say what the project was, but the worst job he had was that he had gotten notes from 5 different people. They were all conflicting notes because clearly they didn't know what they wanted for the vision of the show. So he had to basically answer to 5 different people with all different notes. So it was hard to obviously figure out what it is they wanted. And then after all that, after a year, they fired him from the project. That's insane. That's damn. Oh my goodness. I was like, wow. But then he said he got to work on shows like SpongeBob, and a favorite of his was Harvey Beaks. And so a bunch of other really cool things from Nickelodeon. And what he said basically was that when you feel discouraged, you have to know and trust yourself, trust the process, and also trust that you have more in you, more creativity to tap into. There's always something else. When you think, oh, you're not happy with whatever you're working on, just know that there's still something else. And so basically it's always reassuring to hear, honestly. To me, it's always reassuring to hear, even of course from professionals, that you have off days sometimes, but you just got to keep persevering, and you'll know that the spark will return and you'll create something even better than you wouldn't even expect it. So that was a really fun panel. And after that was a panel I also knew I wanted to go to because I saw it promoted on Instagram. And that was the Johnny Bravo panel. And anything that kind of is just something that I grew up watching, I'm always I can't wait to go see that. When I talked about the Fairly Odd Parents panel, for instance, earlier, when I talked about my experience at ToonCon, anything that my kid self absolutely loved, I'm always oh goodness, I can't wait to hear more about the making of it and behind the scenes stuff. And so Van Partible, the creator of Johnny Bravo, was the host of the panel. And then Jeff Bennett, the voice of Johnny Bravo, was there. And then also this little girl who played, she wasn't the original Susie, but this little girl now who did the voice of Susie for the live table read that they did. And also Candy Milo was there. And then also Lance Rock, who also hosted the Ego Plum like right before that, the Ego Plum panel. Also, Gumby was at that Ego Plum panel because every once in a while Gumby just like was whispering something to Ego Plum. He's like, okay. So I don't know, that was funny. But Lance Rock was part of, like, he's DJ Lance Rock, I guess. He was part of Yo Gabba Gabba. I never watched that show. I mean, I'm sure that's like a beloved show as well, but he was decked out in orange. He seems like a really awesome, like really fun person as well. But so he was there too, just like as a friend for Van Portable and to just do some more of the voices. And then also Candy Milo was there. And I saw Candy Milo in person last year at LA Comic Con because she was also part of the panel last year for the 20th anniversary of Jimmy Neutron, because, you know, she voices Nick Dean, and for that panel, she voiced that movie guy. You know, they did the episode, whatever it was, the Lights, Camera, Danger, whatever it was, whatever. Now I'm like off track, whatever. You can go back and listen to my episode about LA Comic Con from the previous year if you're interested. That was the 200th episode of this podcast. My first year attending LA Comic Con, so now my second year. So anyway, that Johnny Bravo panel was by far the biggest panel that I attended in terms of like the audience. Like there were a lot of people there, a lot of fans. And Van Partibles shared a bunch of old videos and photos and artwork from Johnny Bravo. And he also shared a short, like an animation short he did for student projects. That was an early version of Johnny Bravo where he was much more so Elvis-y, because the whole thing with Johnny Bravo is that he's like Elvis, like, whoa, mama. That's so cringy every time I try to replicate one of these voices, but whatever, you know, the voice. And what he said was, that I found interesting, was that originally the studio wanted, because like he wanted that Elvis voice, and he wanted like young, sexy Elvis, so that's what Jeff Bennett did, but originally they wanted, as in they, the studio, wanted Jess Harnell, who he said, Jess Harnell, you know, of course, he's most known as the voice of Wacko from Animaniacs, and he does 11 million voices, like all of these talented voice actors, you know, 11 million, that's a number. But anyway, he said he had to fight for Jeff Bennett, and so there you go, the rest is history. And so, like, stuff he shared was really, really fun, like just like behind the scenes stuff, and like old stuff from their time, like, you know, old photos of their time recording, like the first few episodes. And also like, so Mae Whitman, a young Mae Whitman, was the voice of Susie back in the day, like in the original recordings. So that's really cool. And what he said, I never knew this, was that after season 1, everyone was fired. They basically retooled the whole show. And then he also said that like Johnny Bravo has basically been erased from Cartoon Network, more or less. And Johnny Bravo, for me as a kid, wasn't one of my favorite shows, but it was just like another fun show to watch. And I most associated it with the show right before bedtime. Like it came on like after like all my favorite shows watching on Cartoon Network. This was like the last show in the lineup before then it would switch to older kid-oriented stuff. I don't know. I don't really remember exactly, but I just remember like Johnny Bravo was like the last show before bed for me, so that's what I always associated it with. But anyway, so he said everyone was fired and that they brought in new people, and the only person that remained from that first season was Seth MacFarlane. I'm telling you, it's wild seeing those old photos of a young Seth MacFarlane and like look at all the stuff he's accomplished now in the animation industry, let alone in the entertainment industry in general, with his music, with all of his shows. And I'd love to meet him too. He just seems like his energy too, like just such a charismatic, warm, funny, talented person. But so like, yeah, seeing like a young Seth MacFarlane, amazing. And also Butch Hartman, of course, too. And I met Butch this year, and like so much fun meeting Butch, and hopefully I'll get to interview him. Hopefully. We'll see. But anyway, so that was really cool. So the episode then that they shared, it was an unproduced episode. The story was by Butch Hartman, and it was written by Seth MacFarlane. So there you go. So like there's like their humor and their like some Family Guy-esque humor and stuff, and Fairly Odd Parents type humor. It's interesting. But it's amazing because, again, I love with voice actors how like once they're just doing their characters, it's like the character is there, you know, it's like they disappear. It's like there's the character like come to life now. So like just them reading this script, it just, like I could envision it in my head perfectly. It was amazing. I could just like envision it. I was like, I feel like literally you're just watching, even though you're just listening to it, but like you're watching an unproduced episode of Johnny Bravo. So basically the premise of it was that Johnny ends up saving little Susie's life. She flies off, whatever, she's like on a swing or something, she flies off, and then she's like, oh yeah, there were just all those pointy objects and fire, so you saved me, so now I'm going to be your butler for life. And then, of course, that's like intervening in his life. And he's, of course, hitting on women. That's the whole shtick with Johnny Bravo. Because then Jeff Bennett was saying, like, if Johnny Bravo today, he'd be canceled every week. Like, literally, the character would be canceled every week. Because that's the whole thing. He's like a pig. He's a perv. He's always hitting on women. And they're always, like, they punch him or whatever. Because, like, he's just being gross and, chauvinistic and stuff. But that's the whole joke. That's the whole thing. It's like, this is how you don't get women. This is how you don't approach people, It's just like, but it's all for the sake of comedy, though. It's all, like, lighthearted because, like, it's a cartoon. It's still for kids. So it was so funny. Like, one joke that made me die laughing is like, okay, let's play peck pong. I could just, like, envision that, like instead of ping pong, like him, like, with a ping pong ball on his pecs back and forth. Hilarious. So stupid. Oh, my God. But so then basically he gets out of it because then she saved his life because he's about to, like, drink expired milk or something. The plot basically is similar to the plot of that episode of Hey Arnold when Sid saves Arnold's life and then Sid thinks he's, like, has to be indebted to Arnold for the rest of his life, doing everything for him. Same thing, same premise there. So that was really funny. That was such an absolute blast, that panel. And then what was fun, so then I was like, okay, those are the main panels I wanted to stay and see. But then I just discovered a few others, like, it just worked out really fun. I stayed for one. It was called Not the Bachelor, and it just was these actors improvising, like, talking to a board of wood and having to, like, win over this board of wood. It sounds ridiculous, and it was just funny. Like, they're just, like, having these character, like, spiels of, like, oh yeah, you should date me because, and, like, they all had, like, these different voices, different characters they were doing. It was a lot of fun, that one. It just was funny. And then also after that, there's another great panel I just stayed for as well that I absolutely loved. I got so much out of it. Was this panel about story editing in animation. And more or less what they were saying was that when looking for new talent, and it's so true, and this makes sense to me, that they want to know new things you could bring to the table, because if similar ideas as someone else that they already have, then it's like, well, we'll just use the writers we currently have. So it's like, what unique ideas are you going to bring? And also basically how the industry, while it's always changing, it's still a matter of, like, going out and meeting people. You never know who's gonna, like, what can lead to someone getting you your first job in the industry and things like that. So I found that really informative and really interesting. And then, like, after that, I went walking around more back at the main artist alley and the main stage. And the thing is, with this convention, I was there the whole day. So then, like, everyone was leaving. We were all leaving, and it was just really busy. It was a lot of fun. People with their cosplay and all the artists and all these panels with so much great information from people in the industry and all the actors and stuff. And that Johnny Bravo panel was so much fun. Van Partible just seems like such a fun, amazing, really talented, like, of course, obviously really talented person, but just, like, really sweet too and really funny. Because he mentioned that he teaches a course in UCLA. I don't remember what it's called. Obviously, I guess something in animation. But he said what was so funny was that this past Halloween, he and all of his students dressed up as Johnny Bravo. That's so cool. And he shared, too, beforehand that there was, like, he shared this like, interstitial thing, which I did vaguely remember it then when he showed it, of, like, Johnny talking to, like, this monkey, and then he's like, oh, you see this monkey, and he's like, oh, what does he look like, and whatever. And, like, he said, like, there was a mistake in the animation where, like, Johnny's torso is cut off, so it's like he's floating. Like, that's so funny. So basically, he was saying that for a lot of them, it was, like, learning as you go with Johnny Bravo. And again, just Jeff Bennett just snapping into Johnny Bravo, doing the voice, like doing that Elvis voice, And he had on, like, a Johnny Bravo shirt. It just was so much fun. The little girl who played Susie, too, her name's, like, Julianne something. I can't remember her name now offhand, but she was wonderful, too. What a great actress. So that was just so much fun. So again, overall, I love these conventions, like, even though by the end of it, it's exhausting, because it's just so thrilling. It's such a true joy throughout the whole day, celebrating things that we love and, stories and shows and comics and artwork and movies and, and these actors and these writers, and it's amazing, these artists. So I can't get enough of it. It's truly such a blast. And again, as always, I can't wait for my next one because my goodness, I had so much fun. I had even more fun this year, but I had so much fun last year too. But, again, just so much fun at LA Comic Con. So what an absolute blast. What a true joy. So many great panels, so many wonderful people. And looking forward to my next one. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com. And as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.